She thought he was just another cold billionaire buying roses in the rain, until he collapsed at her feet. When she brought him back to life, she never expected he held the secret to her past, and a legacy someone would do anything to keep buried. Now she must choose, walk away, or uncover the truth that could destroy them both. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rain hadn't let up in hours. Camila adjusted the tarp over her flower cart for the third time that morning, shaking the water from her sleeves. New York looked gray and tired, but her blooms, vivid sunflowers, blushing tulips, and the last of the season's white roses refused to wilt. They were the only color in a world that felt like it had forgotten how to breathe. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, humming softly as she rearranged a bouquet. That's when she saw him. A tall man, dressed in a tailored black coat, stepped out from the shadows of the park's gate. His shoes splashed through a puddle, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His face was sharp, pale, unreadable, like someone who'd forgotten how to feel. Yet something about him made her heart pause. Maybe it was the way his eyes scanned the flowers, not as a buyer, but as someone searching for something he'd lost long ago. He stopped in front of her cart, rain dripping from the brim of his umbrella. "White rose," he said, his voice low and clean, like steel on silk. Camila blinked. "Just one?" He didn't answer, only handed her $100 bill, took the rose, and walked away. No smile, no name, nothing. She watched him disappear into the mist, a man dressed like grief, clutching a fragile flower like it was a lifeline. The next day he returned. Same time, same coat, same request. Camila hesitated, this time handing him the rose more gently. "Are you okay?" His eyes flicked toward her. Something flashed. Pain, surprise, then it was gone. "I don't believe in answering questions from strangers," he replied. She tilted her head. "Then maybe stop being one." That earned a pause. A heartbeat of silence. Then he walked away. For the next 3 days he came back. Always at sunrise, always alone, always for a single white rose. Each time, Camila tried something new. A joke, a story, a weather comment. He never laughed, never stayed long, but he kept coming. It wasn't until the 5th morning that everything changed. The sky was dark with rain again, thunder rumbling in the distance. Camila was arranging her cart, tugging her scarf tighter around her neck, when she heard a thud. She turned, and there he was. The man in black collapsed on the sidewalk beside her cart, the rose still clutched in his hand. She rushed to his side. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open for a second, enough for her to see something terrifying. Fear, not of her, but of something deeper, older. Then he passed out cold. Camila didn't think twice. She flagged down a cab, begged the driver for help, and somehow, through whispered pleas and the force of her will, got the stranger into the back seat. She didn't take him to a hospital. She didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her those last few mornings, like he didn't trust anyone else. Instead, she took him home, to her small, warm, slightly messy apartment above a bakery in the Bronx. She laid him on the couch, covered him with a blanket, and sat nearby, heart racing. It wasn't until nearly sunset that he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, squinting at the light. Camila moved closer. "You're safe." He frowned. "Where am I?" "Beet market." "You fainted, outside my flower cart." He sat up with effort, wincing as he held his side. She handed him a glass of water. "You should probably see a doctor." He shook his head. "No hospitals." She studied him. "You have a name?" A long silence passed. Then, "Nathaniel?" "Now? What?" He met her eyes. "Wolfe." Her breath caught. That name, it couldn't be. Camila stared at him, her pulse quickening. Nathaniel Wolfe. She'd seen that name on headlines before. A billionaire, reclusive investor. a ghost in designer suits. The man who once ran half of Manhattan's real estate, then vanished after a scandal no one could quite explain. Rumors said he'd bought a private island. Others whispered something darker: mental collapse, betrayal, heartbreak. And now he was sitting on her couch, damp and pale, holding a glass of water like it might shatter in his hand. He noticed her hesitation. "You recognize the name?" She nodded slowly. "You're kind of hard to forget." He looked away. "I was hoping to be." Camila lowered herself into the armchair across from him, unsure of what to say. Her apartment suddenly felt too small for someone who probably owned skyscrapers. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said after a pause. "I can leave." "You pouts out in the street," she replied gently. "I wasn't about to let you die just to protect your pride." He gave the barest flicker of a smile, more like a twitch. "I suppose I should thank you." "You don't have to," she said, standing. "Just eat something before you go." Camila moved into the kitchenette and started heating up leftover lentil soup. She kept an eye on him through the corner of her eye. He didn't move, didn't ask questions, just sat there, watching the rain tap softly against the window pane. When she returned with the soup and a slice of bread, he didn't hesitate. He ate slowly, methodically, as if trying to remember how. "Do you always do this?" he asked between bites. "Feed strangers?" she asked with a smirk. "Only the ones who buy a ridiculous number of white roses." "I wasn't counting," she replied. "That's 5. He looked down at the spoon. "I liked the way you wrapped them, like they were important." Camila's smile softened. "They are. White roses mean hope." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Hope," he echoed. "Not a word I hear often." She studied him. The lines around his eyes weren't just from age. They were from loss, regret, grief buried deep in the bones. "Who were the roses for?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Someone I lost." "Sorry." He didn't respond, but she saw the way his jaw clenched. "Sleep here tonight," she said. "The rain's not letting up. I can manage." "Sure you can, but I'd rather not find you passed out in front of my cart again." He looked at her, surprised by the fire in her voice. After a long beat, he gave a slight nod. "Thank you," he said. "Camila, right?" She blinked. "You remember things that matter." The next morning, Camila woke to the smell of coffee brewing. She padded into the kitchen to find Nathaniel, sleeves rolled up, making 2 mugs of instant coffee. "You really don't belong in a kitchen," she teased. "I built 3 luxury hotels," he replied, "but coffee machines still intimidate me." She laughed, and he handed her a mug. "You should go," he said quietly. She nodded, but something in her chest ached at the thought. "You'll be back?" He met her eyes. "I don't know." That answer sat between them for a long time, but before he stepped out the door, he turned and reached into his coat pocket. He placed a single white rose on the table. "Hope," he said, and then he was gone. But Camila would see him again, sooner than she expected, and next time he wouldn't just be buying a flower. He'd be asking for something far more dangerous. 3 days passed before Camila saw him again. She had just finished setting up her flower cart when the black car rolled to a stop beside the curb. The window lowered, and Nathaniel Wolfe was seated in the back. Black coat, silver cufflinks, and an expression that flickered between hesitation and something close to regret. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. Camila blinked. "You tracked me down?" "Weren't exactly hiding." She crossed her arms. "I don't usually follow strange men into cars." "I'm not asking you to, just lunch." Her gut told her to walk away, but her heart, still remembering that white rose he left behind, told her to get in. At the cafe, Nathaniel barely touched his food. Instead, he pulled out a folded piece of parchment and placed it between them. "I need someone I can trust," he said quietly. "For the next 6 months?" She raised an eyebrow. "To do what? Save your life again?" His lips twitched. "Not quite. I'm organizing a final floral tribute. A private series of events, 6 curated themes, 6 months of floral design and staging. You'll live on my estate. Full room and board. Monthly salary triple what you earn here. And a final bonus large enough to start your own shop, anywhere you want. Camila stared at him. You want me to be your florist? Even floral assistant, he clarified. There's more to it. I'll explain in time. Sounds vague and mildly creepy. I know how it sounds, he said, but you brought me back when I'd given up. I want to do something that feels alive, before it's too late. Something in his voice cracked on those last words. Camila noticed it, and it wasn't just exhaustion, it was resignation. You're dying, she said softly. He didn't deny it, just looked away. She took the contract, heart pounding. Why me? Because you see people no one else bothers to. Back at her apartment that night, Camila didn't sleep. The numbers on the paper could change everything. Her life, her future. The way her mother wouldn't have to work another day cleaning downtown office buildings. But the voice in her head, her father's voice, reminded her never to trust a man in black with a contract. Still, she sighed. The Wolfe estate was less a house and more a modern cathedral. Black stone, high ceilings, steel and glass, cold, intimidating, and stunning. A driver met her at the gates and handed her a house badge. Don't lose this, he warned. Ms. Margot doesn't like uninvited guests. Maggot? His sister. Camila clutched the badge tightly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bergamot and winter pine. Her room was elegant but impersonal. She unpacked slowly, wondering what kind of man built such beauty only to shut the world out of it. Later that evening, a staff member escorted her to the greenhouse behind the estate. That's where she found Nathaniel Eves, rolled pruning roses by hand. You prune your own flowers? She asked. He smiled faintly. Therapy, or an illusion of control. She stepped closer. The glass ceiling above caught the evening light, casting golden beams across his face. For a moment, she saw the boy beneath the billionaire, the one who maybe, just maybe, still believed in something delicate. Let's begin, he said. She nodded, stepping into the greenhouse, unaware that this place would become far more than just a job. It would become the first real home she'd known in years. The following days settled into an unusual rhythm. Camila woke early, always before the staff. She'd walk through the estate gardens, making mental notes of bloom cycles, sun angles, and which flowers the bees loved best. Then she'd retreat to the greenhouse, where Nathaniel would already be working, usually silent, but never unkind. She learned quickly that he didn't like unnecessary noise or small talk, but he listened closely when she spoke about her designs. She said one morning, arranging ivory peonies with deep green ruscus is for forgiveness. It feels like something someone would place after saying sorry, or maybe after it's too late. Nathaniel studied her work without blinking. You read flowers like people. You read people like contracts, she countered. He didn't argue. Over dinners in the glass solarium, they shared pieces of themselves in fragmented sentences. She told him how her father died, fixing streetlights, how she started selling flowers to pay for her mother's medication, how dreams had to wait when rent did. He listened, never offering pity, only attention. But not everyone was pleased by her presence. Margot Wolfe arrived one crisp morning in a gray suit and sharper eyes. You're the florist, she said, looking Camila up and down. You're the sister, Camila replied politely. Margot's expression didn't change. Don't mistake his kindness for permanence. Nathaniel brings in strays when he's lonely. Then, forget them when the seasons change. Camila held her ground. I didn't ask for this job, I earned it. Let's hope you don't lose it. The exchange left Camila rattled but more determined. Later that day, as she was arranging sunflowers and thistles in the study, Nathaniel walked in and paused at the doorway. She came to you, didn't she? Camila nodded. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone, he said simply. But you don't need her approval. Just do what you came to do. She met his gaze. "And what exactly did I come to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out toward the forest lining the estate. When he spoke, it was with a softness she hadn't heard before. "To make something beautiful before I go." Camila swallowed. "You mean die?" Nathaniel turned. "No, before I disappear." She didn't know what he meant, but she felt the weight behind his words. That night, as she cleaned up the greenhouse, she found an old sketchbook wedged beneath a row of clay pots. It was filled with drawings, floral installations, garden layouts, all signed N. Wolfe in faint pencil strokes. One design in particular caught her eye, a circular display of red ranunculus and eucalyptus, surrounded by taper candles. The title scribbled above it read, "To the One I Failed." She traced the page, heart aching. Whoever he was building these tributes for, it wasn't just himself. He was grieving something. Or someone. The next morning, she found a note on her tray of tools. "Meet me in the North Garden. We begin the first tribute today." She pressed the paper to her chest and breathed deeply. Camila had stepped into this world because of a rainstorm and a man in black who collapsed outside her cart. But now, she was inside something far deeper, a maze of grief, legacy, and maybe the beginning of something redemptive. She picked up her shears and walked out into the light. Camila wandered deeper into the estate grounds than usual one gray morning. The mist hung low, and the trees whispered secrets as the wind stirred their bare limbs. Past the orchard and behind an overgrown hedge, she stumbled upon it. An old, forgotten greenhouse. Ivy had choked half the glass panels. The door sagged from one hinge, and wilted vines clawed up shattered wooden frames. But in the center of the ruin, a single orange zinnia had bloomed through the cracked stone floor. Something about it tugged at her. Later that day, she mentioned it to Nathaniel over tea. "There's a greenhouse back by the orchard. Abandoned." His eyes flicked toward the window. "I haven't seen it since I was a boy. Would you mind if I tried to revive it?" He paused, swirling his spoon. "If you can bring it back to life, maybe something else will too." Camila didn't waste a moment. The next morning, she pulled on gloves and began the careful work of reclaiming the space. Luis, the gardener, offered quiet help, clearing, brush, fixing panels. They worked in silence, interrupted only by the calls of sparrows overhead. One afternoon, Nathaniel appeared at the entrance, hands in his coat pockets. Blair sighed. "A word to ignore? Perhaps a secret insight here after lessons," he murmured. "My mother would leave me wildflower seeds and a note with riddles. She called it Our Secret Kingdom." Camila glanced at the soft smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "She sounded like she was magic." "She was," he said, walking deeper inside, stepping over roots like they were memories. They began working side by side, Camila with her steady hands, Nathaniel with a kind of reverence. As days passed, the structure regained its shape. New pots lined the restored benches, ferns unfurled toward the sunlight again. And in the quiet between pruning and planting, stories bloomed. He told her of his mother, Celeste Wolfe, how she used to hum opera in the kitchen, how she died when he was 12, too young for the grief, but too old to forget her. He said once, "Margot, my father, they were always shadowed." Camila listened, gently arranging morning glories as he spoke. "Maybe that's why you love flowers. They don't hide what they are." He looked at her then. "Really look. Neither do you." That night, after he retired early, Camila stayed behind in the garden shed, looking for a missing spade. Her flashlight landed on a loose floorboard near a stack of broken clay pots. Curiosity sparked. She pried it up and discovered a wrapped bundle of linen, dry with time and dust. Inside, a faded leather-bound journal with a broken clasp. The name Celeste was etched faintly on the front cover. Heart pounding, Camila opened it. The pages were delicate, filled with looping handwriting and drawings of lilies, lavender, even small pressed petals. But what stopped her was one entry, dated just months before Celeste's death. Her eyes, "My eyes, I saw it. She wore blue. Her eyes, my eyes. I was told she didn't survive, but I held her hand. She's alive. And they'll bury me before they ever bury the truth. Camila froze. Child? A girl? Was Celeste saying she had a daughter? Someone no one ever spoke of. She closed the journal carefully and slid it into her jacket pocket, her mind reeling. The next morning, she approached Luis as he watered the southern hedge. Did Celeste ever have another child? Luis's hands paused. He looked around carefully before setting the hose aside. Stories, he said quietly. Whispers. Of a birth kept quiet. A child who vanished. Would they hide that? She asked. Because in the Wolfe family, he replied gently, some things are buried in the soil, and not all of them bloom. Camila stood beneath the soft afternoon light filtering through the greenhouse roof. The journal weighed heavily in her pocket, but the words inside it weighed even more on her chest. She hadn't told Nathaniel, not yet. She didn't know how. Instead, she threw herself into the restoration. Roses now bloomed in rows of color, every verde blush, deep crimson, jasmine vines curled around trellises like memories, rising. Camila worked until her hands ached and her knees bruised, until the garden wasn't just revived, it was alive. Nathaniel joined her each day, no longer as an observer, but as a participant. He planted herbs while she arranged bouquets. He told her how his father used to bring business associates here to show off his domestic investment. But Celeste had always treated the greenhouse like a refuge, a place far removed from the expectations and cruelty inside the mansion walls. Why wonder what she'd think now? Nathaniel mused one day, wiping soil from his palms. Camila smiled faintly. She'd say the garden finally remembered what it was for. He didn't ask what she meant, but he looked at her a moment longer than necessary. That evening, Camila sat in her room, the journal open across her lap. She flipped through pages inked in hope and grief. Celeste had written of loneliness, of secrets locked behind velvet curtains, of a little girl she wasn't allowed to love out loud. Camila read the last full entry 3 times. We think they've erased her, but flowers always return in spring. The next day, she brought it up, carefully. Did your mother ever talk about wanting more children? She asked Nathaniel as they repotted tulips. He looked startled. No. After me, the doctors said it was risky. What if there had been someone else, someone hidden? His gaze grew distant. Margot once hinted at something, back when she was still human. I was too young to understand. Camila hesitated, then reached into her satchel and handed him the journal. Nathaniel took it slowly, fingers brushing the worn leather. He flipped to the page she'd marked. As his eyes scanned the words, his mouth tightened, breath catching halfway through. He wrote this, he said quietly, and no one ever saw it. Someone made sure they didn't, Camila said, but she wanted it found. Nathaniel closed the journal and looked at her. Why did you show me this? Because you deserve to know, and maybe someone else out there deserves to be known too. That night, he didn't join her in the greenhouse. But the next morning, Camila woke to find a single, white camellia placed beside her breakfast plate. It was the flower Celeste had written about the most. Art grew colder with every passing day. She watched them from windows, glared from stairwells. Once, Camila found one of her arrangements torn apart on the kitchen counter. Louise offered no words, only picked up the broken petals and dropped them quietly into the composts. Camila didn't back down. She planted wild violets near the path leading to the greenhouse, flowers of resilience. Nathaniel helped her anchor wooden benches beneath the blooming apple trees. They invited staff to visit, to read, to rest. What had been forgotten was becoming shared. On the 3rd Thursday, Nathaniel handed her a leather-bound notebook. Started writing her story, he said softly. Our story, maybe. Camila nodded. Just make sure you leave space for chapters she never got to write. They stood in silence, side by side, 2 people bound by grief, soil, and something new taking root between them. Behind them, the greenhouse shimmered in sunlight, full of life and secrets, and maybe even redemption. The rain had fallen hard all morning, leaving streaks on the estate's tall windows and puddles between rows of roses. Camila waited by the kitchen door, the journal clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with every tick of the antique wall clock. She wasn't sure if this would lead anywhere, or open wounds best left buried. When Mrs. Yara entered with a tray of tea and pastries, Camila stopped her gently. "I need to ask you something," she said, voice steady despite the tremble beneath. The older woman froze, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, Miss Camila?" Camila opened the journal, turning it to a page near the end, the one with Nathaniel Wolfe's faint, aching words about a child hidden from the world. Mrs. Yara's hands tightened on the tray, her lips parted, but no sound came. "I think you know what this means," Camila whispered, "and I think I have a right to know." The tray clattered onto the counter as Mrs. Yara sat down heavily in the nearest chair. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, finally, she looked up. "Your mother? Her name was Emilia. I knew her before I ever knew you. She was born right here, in this house. But no one outside these walls ever knew." Camila's breath caught. "She was Celeste's child," Mrs. Yara continued, her voice heavy with regret. "Born in secrecy. The family called it a mistake, a scandal, so they sent her away to distant relatives. I was sworn never to..." Camila blinked hard, unable to form a single word. "I only broke that promise now," Mrs. Yara added, "because I see Celeste in you, in your hands, in your eyes when you look at the garden." Tears burned at the edges of Camila's vision. Why didn't anyone try to find her? Why didn't anyone bring her back? Festi tried. She wrote letters, made calls, but every effort was blocked by the Wolfe men, especially Margaret's father. He believed a hidden daughter would ruin their legacy. So, he silenced it all. "Yes, Emilia," Camila asked. "What happened to her?" "Never told me the full story," Mrs. Yara said quietly. "Only that she grew up feeling like she didn't belong. When she came back to the city years later, I saw her once, briefly. She had a daughter then, a little girl with wide eyes and muddy shoes." Camila couldn't breathe. "You," Mrs. Yara whispered. "She introduced you as Mila. And now here you are again, in this house, with the same fire your grandmother carried." The room spun. Camila pressed a hand to her chest, trying to hold the pieces of herself together. When she finally left the kitchen, she didn't go straight to Nathaniel. She went to the greenhouse, to the bench beneath the apple trees. She sat there until the rain eased, until the ache of unanswered years dulled into resolve. Later, she found Nathaniel reading beside the fireplace, glasses sliding low on his nose. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. He looked up. "Go ahead." She held the journal out to him again. But this time, she didn't speak in riddles. She told him the full story, about her mother, about the hidden daughter, about who Celeste really was to her, and most of all, who she was to him. Nathaniel didn't react at first. He stared at the fire for a long time. Then he stood, slowly, walked across the room and pulled her into a tight, trembling hug. "You brought more than roses," he murmured. "You brought back my family." And neither of them noticed the shadow near the hallway. Margaret, frozen mid-step, her expression unreadable. Margaret stood still just beyond the archway, her breath shallow. The words she'd just heard rang in her ears like sirens. "Camila is family." Her nails dug into her palms. That flower girl wasn't just some charity case Nathaniel brought in. She was blood, a wolf, and that changed everything. She turned quietly and vanished down the corridor, her mind already spinning through possibilities, alliances, and threats. Back in the sitting room, Nathaniel released Camila and stepped back, his eyes damp but full of wonder. "I always wondered why you felt familiar," he said softly. "Now I know. You carry her." "Celeste?" "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Camila said. "I didn't know myself, but once I found out, I couldn't keep it from you." Nathaniel gave her a tired but grateful smile. "You didn't keep it, you brought it back. That takes courage." Camila exhaled. Do you think your family will accept it? Nathaniel looked away, the firelight casting shadows over his scarred features. My family? He shook his head. They won't have a choice. You're not just a wolf by blood. You've earned your place here. Tenfold. She smiled faintly, but something in her chest remained tight. Not everyone sees me that way. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Is Margot giving you trouble? Camila hesitated, then nodded. She hasn't said much, but I can feel it, the way she watches me, like I'm taking something from her. Nathaniel's voice grew firm. She spent years guarding what little power she thinks she has left. But I won't let her hurt you. Not now, not ever. Camila felt something shift inside her then. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was being protected, seen, named. Later that night, she returned to the greenhouse. The moonlight poured through the arched glass roof, casting silver shadows across the blooming roses. She placed the old journal on the workbench, beside a pot of violets she'd brought back from near death. A quiet knock came from the entrance. It was Luis, the groundskeeper. I heard what happened, he said, stepping in. About who you are. Camila looked at him carefully. Are you going to treat me differently now? Luis smiled gently. You're still the girl who saved the jasmine and argued with me over lavender placement. She laughed softly. So nothing's changed? Only this, Luis said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny, wrapped package. Your grandmother gave this to me before she passed, said to keep it safe until the right person came looking. Camila opened it slowly. Inside was a single silver pendant, shaped like a flower with a tiny ruby at its center. On the back engraved words, "To the one who finds the garden again." She blinked back tears. She meant this for me. Louise nodded. I think she always hoped you'd return. Somehow. Camila held it against her chest. I'll wear it every day. Back in the main house, Margot poured herself a glass of wine, her expression unreadable. On the table before her were old estate documents, birth records, family trusts, everything she could use to stake her claim. She's not taking this from me, she whispered. Not without a fight. Meanwhile, upstairs, Nathaniel stood at his bedroom window, watching the moon rise. Camila, his niece, his family. And maybe, just maybe, the part of his story that would redeem it all. Nathaniel's handwriting trembled slightly as he signed the final page of his updated will. His estate attorney gave a respectful nod, quietly slipping the documents into a leather folder. The air in the Wolfe library felt thick with historios of dusted tomes, fading oil portraits, and the weight of generations gone by. Camila stood near the French doors, watching the rain streak the glass. She hadn't asked for any of this, but now, half the Wolfe estate, the grounds, the assets, the legacy, would bear her name. I want you to have it, Nathaniel had told her that morning, his voice quieter than usual. Not because you're family, but because you brought this place back to life. Margot had stood frozen by the fireplace, her hands clenched in silence, her expression unreadable, until it wasn't. You're out of your mind, Margot hissed once the lawyer left. Giving her our name, our land, our blood, she doesn't belong here. Camila's voice was calm but firm. I didn't ask for any of this, but I won't apologize for being born. Margot didn't reply. She just turned and walked away, her heels striking like thunder on the marble floor. That night, Luis found Camila in the restored greenhouse, her hands gently checking the roots of a budding orchid. He looked uneasy. You should be careful, he said softly, glancing at the tall hedges outside. Margot, she doesn't take kindly to being crossed, especially by people she sees as threats. Camila paused, brushing soil from her palms. She sees me as a threat? Louise nodded once. Margot doesn't protect people, she protects power. Camila tried to laugh it off, but something in his tone stayed with her. Around midnight, she awoke to a strange creaking noise. She threw on a sweater and slipped outside. The cold bit at her ankles as she walked barefoot down the stone path to the greenhouse. The door was ajar. Inside, chaos greeted her. Her neatly organized pots were shattered. The heirloom roses she had nurtured from fragile cuttings lay trampled and broken. Soil was smeared across the tiles like bruises. She stood in the doorway for a long time, her heart pounding. The next morning, she found Margot in the solarium, sipping tea and flipping through a society magazine as if nothing had happened. "You were in the greenhouse," Camila said without preamble. Margaret barely glanced up. "It's a shame what happened. Greenhouses can be so delicate." Camila stepped closer, anger flooding her chest. "What did I ever do to you?" I finally met her eyes, steel on steel. "You were born. That was enough." Camila turned away, blinking back tears. Luis was right. This wasn't just family tension. It was war. She packed her bags in silence, folded her aprons, watered the few plants that had survived. Maybe she didn't belong here after all. But as she walked past the study, she heard a thud. Rushing in, she found Nathaniel collapsed by the window, one hand clutched to his chest. She dropped her suitcase and ran to him, kneeling by his side. "Stay with me," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus. He reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. "Don't let her erase you," he whispered. "You're the only one who ever made this place feel like home again." Camila nodded, tears streaming down her face. Camila sat beside Nathaniel's hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors echoing like a clock ticking away borrowed time. His face, once sharp with power and precision, now looked softened by pain. But even in that fragility, there was defiance in his eyes, defiance and trust. Luis stood quietly in the corner, arms folded, worry etched across his brow. The doctors had said it wasn't a heart attack, but the stress had taken a toll. Exhaustion, overwork, hidden damage. Camila knew the truth. It was the weight of secrets, of unfinished business and unspoken wounds. Margot hadn't visited, not once. "Is she even here?" Camila asked softly without turning around. Luis sighed. "She left for the city. A board meeting, supposedly." Camila let out a bitter breath. She always runs when the truth gets uncomfortable. Nathaniel stirred. Camila leaned in, brushing a damp curl from his forehead. His eyes flickered open again. "I should have done this sooner," he rasped. "Written the truth? Given you more than a title. And if you stood like statues." "You gave me enough," she said. "You gave me something real." His voice was firmer now. "I gave you a war, and I won't leave you to fight it alone." She clasped his hand. "Then don't leave." The next few days passed in slow motion. Camila moved between the estate and the hospital, rebuilding what she could of the greenhouse during the day and watching over Nathaniel at night. He was healing slowly, but his spirit remained anchored to the estate. She could see it in the way he talked about it, not as a fortress, but as a place that could finally become a home. One evening, as she returned to the estate, she found a small envelope waiting for her on the pillow in her room. There was no name, no return address, just her initials in embossed gold. Inside was a single pressed rose, dead, brown, crumbling. Beneath it, a card. Even weeds bloom before they're pulled. Camila stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. Enough. She stormed down the corridor, the walls echoing her footsteps. She found Margaret in the music room, playing a slow piece on the piano with haunting precision. "You think this is a game?" Camila said, slamming the card onto the keys. Margaret's fingers paused. She didn't flinch, just glanced at the card. "You should have taken the money when you had the chance," Margot murmured. "I'm not going anywhere," Camila said. "And I'm not afraid of you." "He should be." Camila's voice was steel now. "You don't get to erase me. Not from the will, not from this house, and not from the family your mother tried to forget." Margaret rose, eyes gleaming like ice. "You're not family," waved politely for Kelly. "But I'm everything your brother wants to protect. And he's still here." She turned and walked out, the echo of her courage louder than Marge's silence. That night, Camila returned to the greenhouse for what remained of it. Under the moonlight, she planted one surviving white rose. Nathaniel's favorite. She pressed her fingers into the dirt and whispered to it, "Grow anyway." As the breeze stirred the leaves around her, she felt it quiet but certain. She wasn't leaving. She was going to fight for the soil, for the truth, and for the man who believed in her even as the world conspired to break him. Back at the hospital, Nathaniel dreamed of a garden blooming, of sunlight, of forgiveness, and of a legacy no longer ruled by fear. The ambulance lights flickered across the Wolfe estate gates as Nathaniel was rushed to the hospital. Camila stood at the bottom of the stone steps, soaked in rain, her heart pounding, not from the storm, but from the fear of losing him. The paramedics didn't let her ride along. Family only, one of them had said. But she was family now, whether the world accepted it or not. Back inside, silence pressed down like fog. Luis gently handed her a warm towel. "You should rest." But Camila shook her head. "She's going to try something. I can feel it." At dawn, her fears proved true. Camila arrived at the hospital just in time to see Margot speaking with Nathaniel's legal advisor and the attending physician. She held a document in her manicured hands, an addendum to the will. "For the safety of his legacy," she declared smoothly, "Mr. Wolfe has signed over power of attorney to me, effective immediately." The lawyer hesitated. "This isn't notarized. And the signature?" "It's valid," Margot snapped. "You can call our family lawyer to confirm." Camila stepped forward, shaking. "He wouldn't do this, not after everything." Margot's eyes narrowed. "Poor girl. You really thought you belonged." Camila clenched her fists. "Where is the original will?" Margot smiled faintly. "What original?" Back at the estate, Camila sat in the greenhouse, surrounded by soil and roots, everything she had tended with care. She looked up at the vines trailing across the rafters. Nathaniel had told her once, "This place remembers more than people think." She rose slowly and moved to the far corner where an old wooden toolbox sat beneath a bench. Inside, wrapped in wax paper and tied with twine, was a leather-bound folder. Luz found her kneeling on the floor minutes later. "What's that?" Camila held it up. "The will, the real one, with Nathaniel's sealed." Louise gasped. "He hid it here." Camila's voice trembled. "He trusted the garden more than his own home." They raced to town. Mrs. Yara, now retired, agreed to come along. "I witnessed the notary visit," she confirmed. "He made it official 2 weeks ago." The courthouse hall was sterile, the air too cold. Margot's lawyer looked up as Camila entered, trailed by Luis and Mrs. Yara. "This is highly irregular," he objected. "Ms. Wolfe already—" "She forged that paper," Camila said clearly, placing the real document on the table. "And this is the truth." The judge examined both documents, noting the distinct signatures, timestamps, and notary stamps. "I'll need the witnesses to testify." Mrs. Yara stepped forward first. "I was in the room. Nathaniel was of sound mind. He wanted Camila protected." Luis followed. "He told me too, said she was his only family." The judge sat in silence, then finally spoke. "The court acknowledges the original will as valid. All attempts to supersede it without legal authority are null. Control of the estate is to be returned to Camila Wolfe." Margot stood frozen, her carefully controlled world collapsing in real time. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You did this," the judge replied. "And you're done." Back at the hospital, Nathaniel stirred. Camila rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she brushed a strand of gray hair from his forehead. He blinked slowly, lips parting. "You stayed." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You didn't give me up. I wouldn't give you up either." His voice cracked. "You saved the garden, and the family name." Camila sat beside Nathaniel's bed, her hand still in his, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor echoing their shared resilience. The morning sun filtered through the hospital window, casting a soft glow across the room. It no longer felt like the end. It felt like a beginning. He looked at her, eyes glassy but alive. "Did she try to stop you?" Camila nodded. "She almost did, but I found the will, hidden in the greenhouse." Luis and Mrs. Yara stood with me in court. Nathaniel smiled faintly. That old toolbox? I knew it would outlive us all. She laughed through her tears. You trusted the flowers more than your lawyers. I trusted you, he said softly, and the truth. The following days passed in quiet waves. Margaret was ordered to vacate the estate within 72 hours. The court found evidence of document forgery, and her social circle quickly evaporated. Her name was still Woad, but now it carried no weight. Camila returned to the estate not with triumph but with purpose. The staff greeted her with gentle nods. For the first time, she wasn't just the girl with the flower cart. She was someone who had fought for her place in a family she never knew she had. She walked into the greenhouse, now fully restored. The white roses had bloomed again. She placed Nathaniel's favorite chair beside the largest bush and trimmed a single stem. Louise joined her quietly. You saved this place. Camila glanced up. No, he did. He gave me a place to stand. Louis looked around the glass walls, his eyes soft. He used to sit right there every Sunday after church. Read the paper, sip strong coffee, talk to the roses like they were old friends. Camila smiled. I think they still remember his voice. Nathaniel returned home a week later, thin and pale but with fire still in his spirit. When he stepped into the greenhouse and saw her waiting, he paused. Everything's blooming, he whispered. Are we? She replied, placing the rose in his lapel. That evening, they sat on the terrace overlooking the estate. Camila poured tea while Nathaniel watched the horizon. I spent most of my life building walls, he said, voice rough. But the garden taught me how to open gates. She looked at him, quietly. You gave me a last name, Nathaniel. But more than that, you gave me history, a mother's truth, a reason to grow. His hand found hers. Promise me you'll protect this. Not just the land, the legacy. I will, she said. Promise me, he added with a broken smile. You plant those sunflowers you keep talking about. Camila laughed. You hate sunflowers. Loud and unruly, he teased, but maybe they belong here now. She looked out over the garden, wind brushing through the vines. Then I'll plant them tomorrow. As stars began to pepper the sky, Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, peace settling on his face. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the future. He had passed the torch to someone who had once sold flowers to strangers, but now bloomed in the soil of her own bloodline. Camila glanced toward the house, where lights glowed in the windows. Margaret was gone, lies were buried, and everything that mattered had rooted itself deep, safe from storms. Camila stood at the edge of the greenhouse, the sun filtering through the newly replaced glass panels. A faint scent of lavender and freshly turned soil lingered in the air. The place was alive again, not just with plants, but with purpose, with memory, with healing. Nathaniel, still pale from weeks of recovery, walked slowly beside her, leaning on a cane. The same man who once wore power like armor now seemed softer, quieter, but not weaker. His eyes scanned the rows of vibrant blooms she had nurtured back from wilt and ruin. But the roses wouldn't survive the frost, Camila whispered, gently brushing a petal. But they did. She did weak, Nathaniel replied, his voice hoarse but warm. They had renamed the greenhouse together, Alina's Garden, in memory of Camila's mother, the woman who had been erased from family records, whose existence had been buried in shame. But not anymore. Not while her daughter stood on her own ground. Camila smiled as she placed the nameplate beside the rose arch. She deserved to be remembered. Diana? Nathaniel's hand trembled as he reached for hers. You didn't just save my life, Camila. You brought back something I thought I lost forever. My humanity. My family. They sat on the old bench under the wisteria tree. He handed her a small wooden box wrapped in velvet. What's this? He took a breath. It was your grandmother's. A botanist. I thought, maybe you'd want her journals. They're filled with drawings, notes, hybrid experiments. She believed flowers could speak louder than words. Camila's eyes welled up. I never knew her. She would have adored you. There were still thorns to sort through: legal matters, estate transitions, and the wary eyes of board members not thrilled about a florist sharing a name on the Wolfe family trust. But Camila no longer cared for their approval. She had earned her place, not through manipulation, but by growing something real from the ground up. Louis passed by with a quiet wave, carrying a tray of fresh herbs for the kitchen. Mrs. Yara followed, humming as she snipped basil. Life had returned to the Wolfe estate, not as it once was, but as it should have always been, rooted in care. Later that evening, a reporter reached out with an offer, a national feature on Camila's rise from flower girl to heir, a story guaranteed to inspire millions. She declined. "This isn't a story for the world," she told Nathaniel. "It's a home for us." He smiled, pride softening his tired features. "You've always known what matters." Just before bed, Camila walked back to Elena's garden. The moonlight traced silver along the glass panes. She stood at the entrance, the key tucked into her palm, her heart full. The past had tried to erase her. Power had tried to push her out. But she had stayed, grown, flourished. Not because she chased legacy, but because she planted love. Nathaniel had a new habit now. He brought her a single rose every Sunday morning. No fanfare, no speeches, just a rose, always different, always thoughtful. Sometimes it was ivory, like the one he'd bought the day they met. Sometimes lavender, like the kind that now framed the path to Elena's garden. Each one came with a simple message, handwritten and left on the kitchen table. A Sunday's note read, "You reminded me that broken things still bloom." Camila pressed the paper to her chest before slipping it into the drawer where she kept them all. Over time, the estate no longer felt like a stranger's world she was only borrowing. It became hers, part memory, part possibility. She replaced the heavy curtains with sheer ones that let the light in. Swapped the cold steel centerpieces with small hand-cut glass vases, each holding wildflowers she and Nathaniel arranged together. There were still traces of the old house, echoes of its grandeur, shadows of its secrets, but they were no longer monsters in the dark. They were history, and history could be reclaimed. One morning, as Camila tended to a row of baby hydrangeas, Margaret's voice played on a TV left on in the kitchen. She was giving an interview, bitter, defensive, playing the victim. She manipulated him, a florist with no pedigree. It's an embarrassment to our legacy. Camila muted the screen, not because the words hurt, but because they no longer mattered. The real legacy wasn't in gold fixtures or gated land. It was in the greenhouse that now hosted weekly free workshops for local children. In the bench Nathaniel had installed beside a new tree planted in Elena's name. In the laughter echoing down once silent halls. Nathaniel grew stronger too. The cane still accompanied him, but he no longer leaned on it so heavily. One morning, he surprised Camila by walking down the greenhouse aisle, unaided, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still think you can outrun me, flower girl?" he teased. She grinned. "Try me." There was no need for labels: uncle, niece, heir, caretaker. What they shared went deeper than roles. It was quiet loyalty. Mutual respect. One rainy afternoon, Camila returned from town to find Nathaniel waiting at the gate, holding an umbrella. She frowned. "You should be resting." He tilted the umbrella toward her. "Some things are worth standing for." They walked together through the garden paths. Camila stopped beside a thorn bush she had trimmed just that morning. A single crimson bloom remained untouched, still gleaming with droplets of rain. "Do you? She ever imagined this?" Camila asked. "My mother?" Nathaniel took a moment. "I think she prayed for it. For you. For healing." Camila looked up at him, eyes soft. "You gave me a place to plant that healing." He looked back, voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a reason to want tomorrow." That night, they sat by the fire. Nathaniel dozed off with a book in his lap, and Camila sat quietly beside him, sketching the greenhouse's new layout for spring. The home was still large, the world still full of noise, but in that moment, it was simple, safe, sacred. Before going to bed, she placed a new sign on the gate to Alina's garden. Where roots remember and roses forgive. Sunlight poured across the newly paved paths of the Wolfe estate, transforming the once lowliness of the paths into something alive, something hopeful. Roses climbed trellises in full bloom, morning glories curled around lampposts, and the sweet scent of lavender perfumed the air from the greenhouse to the garden's edge. At the center of it all stood Camila. She knelt by a cluster of girls in overalls, their hands muddy but eyes bright. "You see this?" she asked, brushing soil around the base of a budding peony. "You don't force it to grow. You give it space, you give it care, and you wait." One of the girls, maybe 10, tilted her head. "Like you." Camila smiled gently. "Exactly like me." The greenhouse wasn't just a building now. It was a classroom, a sanctuary. Every week, girls from the city arrived by bus to learn how to grow things, not just flowers, but patience, courage, and pride in their hands. Nathaniel watched from a nearby bench. He leaned back, breathing deeply, cane resting beside him but rarely needed anymore. His health had stabilized. His presence, once shadowed by grief and power, was now filled with light. He stood slowly and walked toward Camila, carrying a clipboard. She stood as he approached. "More forms?" she teased. He chuckled. "Just one today." She glanced down, a mock-up of a new plaque, at the top in bold engraving, Florist Wolfe Botanical Center. Her fingers froze on the page. "You're serious?" "I'm many things, Camila, but not someone who forgets who brought this place back to life." She blinked fast. "You're putting my name on the gate?" "Just yours. Yours and hers. Flora gardened, your mother's name, your legacy, her courage. It belongs here. It always did." Tears welled in her eyes. "Nathaniel?" He placed a hand over hers. "I've had wealth my whole life, but I've only just learned what it means to leave something that actually matters." She nodded slowly. "Then let's make it official." Later that afternoon, workers gently removed the old wrought iron plaque at the estate's grand entrance. In its place, a new one gleamed under the sun. The Florist Wolfe Botanical Center. The words weren't just etched into the metal, they were written into the earth beneath it, into the story of every rose and root growing on the land. People from the community began arriving weekly, not for the history or the name, but for what the land had become. A place of healing, of redemption, of second chances. Porters tried to get interviews. Camila declined every time. "This isn't a headline," she told them. "It's a home." At night, the estate glowed from within, soft lights winding through the garden like fireflies. Camila sat with Nathaniel on the porch swing, the same swing that had once belonged to Elena, her mother, before she was cast away. "She would have loved this," Camila whispered, looking out at the grounds. Nathaniel nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "She'd be proud of you, of the woman you've become." Camila turned to him, voice steady. "And I'm proud of the man you've become, not the billionaire, not the name, just you." They sat in silence, a shared peace between them that didn't need words. The next morning, Camila woke early. Dressed simply, carrying one white rose, she made her way to the cemetery on the edge of the property. Alina's grave stood beneath an old oak tree, the stone weathered but strong. Camila knelt down, placing the rose gently at the base. Her fingers brushed the engraved name. "You weren't forgotten," she said softly. "You were the seed." Camila stayed kneeling by the grave, her fingers trailing the moss-covered edges of the stone. Wind brushed through the trees, stirring the petals of the rose she'd left. A memory flickered, of her mother's voice, singing lullabies with a soft accent, of the way her fingers would brush Camila's curls behind her ear as a child. For so long, she'd believed her mother had been forgotten, erased by the power and silence of the Wolfe name. But now her name was on the gate, not as a footnote, not as a scandal, as the root. "Wimpily, thought you were lost," Camila whispered. "But you were here, in me, in the garden, in every bloom they tried to bury." Footsteps crunched behind her. She turned and found Nathaniel, dressed in a charcoal sweater and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. He knelt beside her, his joints stiffer than hers, but his hand firm when it took hers. Bought the table quickly and found Frank and the Christmas doll laughing. But it turns out I was waking up. Camila leaned her head against his shoulder. You've given me more than a name, and what he asked you to do. You took it back? You reminded me what it was supposed to mean. They stayed there for several minutes, listening to the wind and the birds and the quiet that comes only after long storms. Eventually, they stood and walked the winding path back toward the estate, now bustling not with staff but with laughter. Children ran between rows of lavender. Volunteers watered the new rose beds. Two women carried large trays of seedlings toward the greenhouse, pausing to wave at Camila as she passed. At the entrance, the new plaque gleamed like a promise. One little girl pointed to it, reading out loud to a friend. "Florist Wolfe? That's her. She teaches us about orchids." Camila smiled, placing a hand on her chest. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She wasn't an outsider peeking into a world of power and silence. She was home. Later that afternoon, the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the garden. Camila stood beneath the archway to Elena's garden, where a new banner had been unfurled for the opening ceremony. Dozens of guests gathered with programs in hand, a few dignitaries, city educators, and community organizers standing among the crowd. Nathaniel took the stage, his voice still crisp though age softened the edges. "This place," he said, "once stood as a symbol of status. Now, it stands as a symbol of something far greater. Roots, legacy, and the courage to begin again." He gestured to Camila. None of this would exist without her. Applause swelled. Camila stepped forward, but didn't go to the podium. Instead, she knelt by a small pot of soil beside the stage and planted a single red camellia, a flower of deep love, resilience, and remembrance. She stood, brushing the soil from her hands. "This garden isn't just for me. It's for every girl who thought she wasn't enough. For every name that was whispered in shame when it should have been sung in pride. And for every woman who bloomed despite the thorns." When the ceremony ended, Camila returned to the greenhouse, where two new students waited eagerly to learn. She rolled up her sleeves and knelt beside them. Nathaniel watched from the path, eyes warm with pride and peace. The sun caught the plaque on the gate behind him. Florist Wolfe Botanical Center. Not just a name, a declaration. He turned and walked toward the greenhouse. Camila looked up and smiled as he approached. "Come to help with the compost." Nathaniel smirked. "Only if you promise not to make me dig." She grinned. "Deal." As they worked side by side beneath the flowering trellises, the estate no longer felt like a monument to power or wealth. It was something alive, humble, honest. And for the first time in both their lives, it felt like theirs. Together they stepped into the light, and the garden bloomed behind them,